Hello and welcome to the Cyrus Community. This is Business Unusual. We continue decoding the Cyrus mandate for today. This is our 8th session. We've been working on a journey that brings clarity on who we are, why we are, what we do, what can we depend on heaven for, what are we sure heaven has for us as we go forward in every part of our kingdom advance. This is for anyone who is part of the Cyrus community, locally or globally, or anyone who wants to understand what we are about, how we function, what drives us, and what is expected of us in terms of kingdom outcomes. If you've not been tracking with us, I'd advise you to please go back and listen to the other 7, because we're almost done on this particular series. Then we'll go back to our normal live streams. This is crucial for us because if we get this right, then it becomes very easy for everybody to understand how to navigate, how to go forward. And if today you are to ask yourself, how do I know what I'm supposed to be doing in this particular season? It gives you a framework within which, if you're part of the community, you can interpret your prophetic word, your proceeding word, your movement forward, because that's where the clarity comes from. So in this particular session, I want to bring in a session that we have covered as part and parcel of one of our master classes, which was Mammon and the 7 giants. But I need to bring a particular spirit, one of the giants we discussed there, because it is crucial to what we discussed in our last conversation. We spoke about after restoration, then there's something called building. There's something called structuring. There's something called putting things together. But you see, when we begin to build, one must understand that the enemy may attempt to interfere with that building. And if we don't understand the wiles of the enemy and the strategies of the enemy, remember we spoke about let each take heed how they build. Let each take heed how they build. That was a crucial part of the last conversation. If you missed it, please go and have a look at it. Apostolic building, the design of apostolic building. But I brought this in play because if we only talk about all that we are doing and saying and how God has sent us, and don't acknowledge the reality that there are places of confrontation, there are places where the enemy may try to stop what we are doing, if we do not at least bring in an aspect to help us discern the enemy. If you're going to be a wise master builder, you must be discerning. So we're going to talk about how to confront what we would call the strategy of the enemy at this stage, which is usually internal occupation and economic control. We need to confront that model because it's a strategy the enemy will use to try and stop the building, or at worst case scenario, at least attempt to, what I would call, the best term to use is contaminate the process. Get involved with the process in a way that you can contaminate it or corrupt it. So that's part of the strategy of the enemy. So we want to expose what I call the Jebusite spirit. This spirit is crucial because in scripture it tells us that this spirit continues to attempt to operate inside Jerusalem, even after there has been a restoration, even after there has been a construction and a building. It then attempts to continue to function within that model, and if we're not careful, there's a strategy it uses that can take us back into a Babylonian model, an attempt to lead us back to an old order. So let's begin with, as usual, some of our key scriptures so that we get clarity on how this spirit operates and how do we deal with it. So in 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 6 to 7, and the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who spoke to David, saying, You shall not come in here, but the blind and the lame will repel you, thinking, David cannot come in here. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David. Judges chapter 1, verse 21. But the children of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites who inhabited Jerusalem. So the Jebusites dwell with the children of Benjamin in Jerusalem to this day. 2 Samuel 24:24. And the king said to Araunah, No, but I will surely buy it from you for a price, nor will I offer burnt offerings to the Lord my God with that which costs me nothing. So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen for 50 shekels of silver. Now, the Jebusite was not a foreign threat. He was inside Jerusalem. Judges 1:21 tells us clearly that the Jebusites dwell with the children of Benjamin in Jerusalem to this day. So even after David takes Jerusalem, meaning after there's been a restoration, after there's been all these processes, the Spirit remains embedded in the culture. Very interesting. This represents spiritual systems within the kingdom that tolerate compromise, that resist true apostolic reform, and that attempt to control resources, access, and narratives. Now, I need to pause here for a minute to explain why I'm bringing this in. And please, I will not be giving a teaching on the Jebusite spirit. We already have done that in a masterclass. If you want it, please get in touch, get a hold of it, where we've broken down all the parameters of this spirit. So I'm speaking from a position, one, that we already have the teaching, but two, to many who already know what this is about. But let's talk about how it works. We have to be careful about how it works. Now, I want to start with how it works in your mentality before how it works in a system. So, what does it want to do? Number one is tolerate compromise. Meaning, as the building starts and we begin to build and attempt to build and want to build what God has asked, the enemy will always attempt to get involved with the process to contaminate it. If you go into the book of Ezra, you'll also find that the same story happens. There's a people called a people of the land who, when they first come to rebuild, basically after Cyrus has released them, says to them, let us help you build. Let us help you build. And they say, no, you'll not help us build. And immediately they begin to resist them, they begin to come against them, they begin to speak against them until a new decree is read by Darius, who reads the Cyrus decree, orders for resources to be released. Which means there was an attempt to contaminate the process. So be careful when compromise attempts to contaminate your process. When the enemy tries to offer you a shortcut, a quicker way, basically telling you, it's like in normal building, an architect will tell you that certain parts of buildings don't compromise on the materials. If you compromise on the materials and you build with inferior materials, it will not be obvious immediately. But one day, when pressure comes, when it rains, it will leak. Many beautiful houses get told on when rain comes. Many beautiful houses get told on when there's an earth tremor. Many beautiful houses get told on over time because things begin to crumble under heat, under the weather. Many things. Why? Because they allowed some substandard material to be put in. That's a term compromise. All right? And when you resist true apostolic reform, when you want the truth but not all the principles that go with the truth. In other words, yes, you agree. Good quality of life. Yes, you agree. Generosity. Yes, you agree. Certain, what is your kingdom DNA? Yes, but on this one, no. On this one, I still have another model. By the way, I was taught in the religious order how this works. So you resist complete reform, complete building of a new blueprint. You want to bring pieces of an old order because you don't think that you should go the full hog of what you've been told needs to be done to take you to the next level in God. And that becomes part of the Jebusite spirit model. And the next thing the Jebusite spirit always wants to do, and this is very interesting, control resources, control access, and control the narrative. Three things. Control resources meaning, and now we're talking about a greater kingdom community, many times, and that's one of the places where the church was shut down quickly, effectively. This is how remember, Jerusalem, the temple is in Jerusalem. So many good, well-meaning ministries began with a blueprint from God. Once God gave them the blueprint, as they began to go forward and brought people on board and allowed people to join the ministry and become part of their leadership, become part of everything, the people began to query certain parts of the design because it felt too much. It felt beyond their capacity. It felt nobody really has to do all that. It felt those details don't matter. And they began to resist the true apostolic reform. They began to want to add models from Babylon. We talked about the bringing back their wives from Babylon in the last conversation. They wanted to bring resource systems, model systems that they had used to build apostolic patterns for Babylon, where they have their own version of an apostolic pattern, but it's really a Babylonian model, and they bring it in and they want it to fit into a kingdom model, And now as a leader, you begin to feel overwhelmed and you begin to allow those models to be brought in. You begin professionalism to be brought into a kingdom structure. Intellectualism to be brought into a kingdom structure. Babylonian models are brought in. And immediately they are brought in, the people who bring them in generally fund their models, generally, as a principle. So that brings immediate control of resources. And the minute there's a control of resources, there's control of access. And even the narrative has to be changed to fit a certain model if you want to go forward. You can no longer give the narrative God gave you. You can no longer give the model that came from God. You have to get a model that is agreeable to the people. A model that is acceptable to the people. We now need to vote on these things. We now need to get everybody's consensus on these things. Why? Because the Jebusite dwells within Jerusalem. You see, the greatest resistance to the kingdom economy is not only Babylon. Babylon usually has an insider called the Jebusite mindset, operating from within Jerusalem. That mindset can operate within your own mind, or can operate within a functional system, trying to bring certain ideas to make the program better, to make the program more functional, more people-friendly, more user-friendly. The Jebusite spirit. See, the Jebusite spirit represents a number of things. It represents pride and control. So it's very interesting. What did it say? You cannot come in here. It blocks access to what God has already defined. But it doesn't block by blocking. It blocks by giving another option. Because it's got the power of false religion. So it offers worship without cost. That's why when Araunah the Jebusite in 2 Samuel 24, verse 22 to 23, offered David the threshing floor for free, David refused because David knew that was going to be economic control. He knew the minute they made the offer and they paid for it, they were going to control your narrative. You know, it is a sad thing to see how many pulpits have lost their narrative because somebody paid for it. How many pulpits have lost their narrative because somebody paid for the building? Somebody who was not part of the system. Somebody who said, let me give it to you for free, ended up taking control of the narrative and directing the message. It's called the spirit of Jebusite. It took economic control because it now owns the threshing floor, and therefore it controls all the values that are released from that threshing floor. You see, the threshing floors are supposed to be places where there's a separation between the spirit and the flesh, where you remove yourself and allow God to take charge. But when Araunah, the Jebusite, owns the threshing floor, he removes God from it and leaves the flesh in. That's the principle of Araunah owning your threshing floor. So the Jebusite spirit is generous. That's a problem. But it is manipulative generosity. Every amount they give is pegged to an outcome. There's going to be a cost. If they give you, they'll expect something. They may just, sometimes all they expect from you is your pulpit so they can release their narrative. That's all they want. And they're willing to pay prime for that pulpit. That's one reality. Sometimes they want to pay for your narrative so that you change the message, so that you speak a different narrative, so that you send a different sound out there. And sometimes they just want to make sure that your narrative is shut down. Don't say what you should say. Say anything else except what you should say. So they offer altars for free, then they maintain control. That's a power of the Jebusite spirit. It dwells in the system, not outside it. So you have to be careful, even in your own mind. How many thought processes do you have that sabotage, try to control, and shut down access to the voice of God? That feel that you're the ones, no, this one is me under threat. I want things to go my way. You know, many times I hear this statement. It's a very interesting statement, where you hear a truth taught and then you say, I don't agree. You see, it sounds smart, but is it really? You see, you can't just say you don't agree with something. The issue is not your position for or against it. The issue is it the truth or not? The query must never be whether you agree or not agree. If God has said something, whether you agree with it or not, it remains the truth. So the fact that you stand up to say, I personally don't agree, does not in any way nullify, change, or shift the truth. So the issue of not agreeing sometimes is your own Jebusite that's cutting you off from resource, cutting you off from truth, cutting you off from reform. You need to query, do I carry any dynamic of a Jebusite? Do I want to control the narrative? Do I want things to go my way? Am I willing only to be generous for control? Meaning, I need to be heard. I don't need to understand. Sometimes we need to ask those questions. Listen, the Jebusite will let you function as long as he owns the platform. Meaning, you'll be operational, you're functional, even as a person. You might be the one really giving your time to kingdom activities, available, doing everything, but internally, you have a Jebusite that's resisting the very environment in which you're serving. That's resisting the very issues that are serving. Now, if what you're doing is slavery and is not God, then you're not dealing with a Jebusite. You're dealing with the Spirit of God that is asking you to leave. But when you have a desire to control the space you're in, check if it is control or if it is insight from God that is allowing you to flow. God does not force anything, neither should we. So if we feel we are not being understood or heard, then the question is it us or is it God? If it is God who is not being heard in the space, you're free. Why should you battle it? But be careful, because the Jebusite is deceptive. He offered David the threshing floor. He offered him the oxen, offered him the wood, meaning he knew exactly what needs to be done, but he was offering it to take control and make sure. Remember the old thing he had said, David will not enter here. So the same person who said David will not enter is now offering David a threshing floor. Really? Something is wrong with that offer. So the threshing floor is a place that belongs to the kingdom, not the Jebusite. That's why David had to buy it full price. 2 Samuel 24:24. I will not offer the Lord that which costs me nothing. I'll pay the price. I am willing to stand for what God has said I should stand for. I am willing to commit and put everything, even if it's going to cost me, even if you're not going to give me, and I have to pay. I'd rather pay so that God can function the way He's supposed to function in that space. That place became the most important space that you could ever imagine. David understood this. He understood that the threshing floor is the place of separation, the place where God allows us to remove the wheat from the chaff, like I said before. It's a place where flesh and spirit, flesh meaning natural intellect, natural reasoning. Flesh doesn't always mean sin. It just means my programming. We need a threshing floor when we leave Babylon, because the threshing floor is the place that separates for us Babylonian thinking from kingdom realities. Without the threshing floor, we will incorporate Babylonian thinking into the kingdom and build a new Babylon. But with the threshing floor, if we allow it to function the way it should, it will allow us to remove the chaff and keep the wheat and go forward. So if you're controlled by the Jebusite, the economy of worship and wealth will be compromised. Everything will now start serving Babylon again. So when David bought it, he represented a kingdom reformer reclaiming access to high-level spiritual platforms. Meaning when we make the choice to pay the price, we've kept the window, the spiritual window open, and Babylon really has no effect and no capacity to stop what we're doing. So as we walk in this model, we are careful not to take handouts. We're very careful. We instead buy back the ground. We buy back the ground of worship. How do we worship God? We will not take for free what we've been offered. There's a model. How do we innovate? How do we function in our economy, in our resources, in our finances? We will not be fooled by an older order that has been entrapped by Babylon to tell us that that system they have, that can only build a temple and can never build a city, becomes the primary model for kingdom economy. No, we will pay the price. We'll go the longer route that brings us to where we need to go. You see, One of the ways that the Jebusite spirit still controls the economy of the church today is that in a subtle manner, there is a preaching and a teaching that makes entrepreneurship seem carnal. Producing wealth seems to be almost what you may call a very necessary evil. It's an evil, but it's necessary. I want to maintain it there. Why? Because we think it is a lower standard of functioning than being on a pulpit. Can we all be on a pulpit? Of course not. Can we all preach? Of course not. It doesn't matter how many Bible schools we run. We are not all called to preach. This is the problem. When you have the mindset that entrepreneurship, business, work is carnal, you then think that you want to go to full-time ministry. You want to abandon the call of God. That's the power of the Jebusite. The Jebusite so fools you because he bought the threshing floor. He bought the pulpit. What was his job? He said, David will never enter here. So when he buys the threshing floor, when he now takes control of the pulpit, he now allows a message to go out. A message that says, all of you should leave what you're doing and come and preach. All of you should come into full-time ministry. All of you should come and live a life of survival because that is spiritual. Because entrepreneurship. And the same Jebusite spirit tells the story. You cannot be an entrepreneurship. You cannot be an entrepreneur without bribing. You cannot make a lot of money without being evil. You can't be rich without cutting corners. All lies of the Jebusite spirit, but speaking from within Jerusalem. That's one of the powers of the Jebusite. That's why he pays for the space. That's why he buys the threshing floor, so he can change the narrative. And then the Jebusite then takes charge and rewards religious activity, never economic impact. So you are elevated for suffering. You are elevated and you are applauded for lack. When things are not working in your life, it means you're spiritual and the devil is after you. The devil hates you. That's why you're suffering so much. So you wear your suffering with a badge as somebody who is so important that the devil must be stressing him. That's what the Jebusite does to you. The Jebusite spirit also keeps you dependent on giving instead of building. Strategic. There's nothing wrong with giving. We've discussed that a lot in the last sessions. But when you're dependent on giving, thinking that's the way out, first of all, you've been cut off from entrepreneurship. You are expected to continue giving anyway, yet there is no strategy for building. So when you're dependent on giving, instead of building, you're diminishing. That's the power of the Jebusite. Because remember, he said, you will have no access. The Jebusite does not stop prophetic words. In fact, it allows and even offers prophetic words. You shall be wealthy, you shall be rich, but cuts you off from functioning in environments that can actually produce that wealth. So there's an offer. Every time there's a decree, there's a speaking over you. Yet that speaking is an entrapment, because the same speaking wants you to come for more speakings and never go anywhere to build the thing you're being prophesied to about. To rather have you be prophesied to 7 times a week, but never step out to do anything with that prophetic word. That's a Jebusite. You see, the Jebusite spirit is not just about stopping you. It's about controlling how far you can go and what price you have to pay to get there. So you have to start learning how to pay the full price. Paying the full price is a whole model by itself. Yet, the key thing is this. What has God said? What is the blueprint? I'm building on that blueprint. Nothing is going to stop me. Nothing is going to slow me down. I will pay whatever price. I'll give up whatever I have to give up because God has said it. I am going there. I'll pay the full price. You see, when the Bible talks about, and nevertheless, in spite of the Jebusite's noise and speaking, David took the stronghold of Zion. Now, taking the stronghold of Zion requires apostolic boldness. It means, despite ridicule, despite mockery, despite whatever was said, intimidation, decrees, David did not back down. He took the stronghold. And then we see he went beyond taking the stronghold. He reached a point where he purchased, he rebuilt, and he renamed the city. It became the city of David. It moved from being just Jerusalem. So what does that tell you? The Jebusite is robbing you of your inheritance, robbing you of your true functional position of that place that has your name on it, of that functionality that has the call of God on it with your name on it. That's what you must deal with when you're dealing with the Jebusite. So this is symbolic of any apostolic reformation. In other words, whenever we are moving what God has said, taking what religion controls and we reconfigure it for kingdom governance. In other words, we bring back treasure, we bring back order, we take the Jebusite out, we pay the full price, we bring the structure back to where it's supposed to be, and we build an order that hasn't been seen. Because up to now, the orders that have been seen that are associated with God have been religious orders. So we have to build something new so that the correct design of kingdom order comes, so that what is associated with God and the kingdom of God becomes this new, powerful, functional thing that everybody is drawn to. So what is one of our rules? We don't just expose strongholds. We take them, we rename them, and we repurpose them for the kingdom. So when you come into this space, when you go to the mind gym, when we walk through what you're doing, we're just not just taking a stronghold. Oh, you know, there's this mindset, this is how I operate, this is where I've come from. No. Remember what we said in the last conversation. We talked about restoration. We said, listen, there is a place where you come from. There's a place of being restored. Then there's a place of being healed. Then there's a place of taking strongholds. When it comes to this dimension, we now take a stronghold, meaning we remove the enemy, we create a new structure. This becomes the operational system. So as we begin to build, we are discerning, we are capable, we know there's a Jebusite attempting to infiltrate, attempting to interfere with things, attempting to make shifts and changes and structures in our operations. Why? Because if we let the Jebusite take hold again, before long, we'll have rebuilt Babylon inside of the kingdom. And as usual, when you get to this part, we always ask the question, where has the Jebusite system allowed me to function, but with limited ownership? In other words, as a believer, how is it possible that I speak of a great and a powerful God? I speak of a Father who owns everything. I speak of a healer. I speak of, and let me stay within the context of the Cyrus community. I speak of a God who owns all economies, all resources, all treasure, all power. I speak it, I declare it, but it seems like I have limited access. I can hardly move. That could be a sign that there's a Jebusite mindset that I probably have functioning, or two, I am under a Jebusite system that's governing my thinking, or I have been taught, raised in a Jebusite mental process that even though there is no Jebusite over me, that model of understanding and teaching that I defend, that I control, that I am so. Let me tell you one of the ways to know that you need to do the Jebusite system. If you've got so many doctrines that you hold dear to, so many teachings that you hold dear to, so many revelations you hold dear to, and not a single one of them can produce anything from you, you are bound by a Jebusite. The kingdom was never about knowledge, ever. It was always about manifestation. It was always about tangibility. It was about things being seen, touched, handled, dealt with. So you cannot be so full of knowledge, of insight, of kingdom revelation. You debate the deepest scriptures. You query things. You want to know about all the levels of how many healings were there, how many baptisms were there. Is baptism for today, tomorrow? What about the communion table? When should we take it out? Listen, if the communion table is not healing you and prospering you, then why are you even discussing it? Whatever it is, if prayer isn't changing your life, isn't shifting you, why are you a prayer warrior? Why are you an intercessor? If no life is being moved, nothing is being shifted, it means the Jebusite got you. You're allowed to say it, but you're not allowed to experience it. You're allowed to speak it, but you never enter into it. That is a Jebusite system. That is the counterfeit of freedom. That is the assumption that we have finally entered, when in truth, you've not entered. You've entered and have been captured in your entering. So the Jebusite is running your system. It means You have accepted a free threshing floor. You've accepted an environment without questioning it that allows you to see, to speak, to talk about, but never experience and come to the reality. You know, the New Testament, I think Paul, writing one of the letters, talks about and warns about these people who are ever learning, but never coming to the knowledge of the truth. Ever learning, never coming to the knowledge of the truth. That is a terrible place to be. You are continuously in learning. You're continuously reading the Bible. You're continuously understanding scriptures. You know things backwards. When a preacher begins to speak, you know it. When somebody begins a statement, you know it. Yet, you cannot show one outcome of everything you've learned. It is better you never read it. You and the person who never read it, no difference. You and the person who never understood it, no difference. And I'm very vehement about this because many people are entrapped in these places. You're frustrating your families. You're frustrating your friends. You're frustrating people about you, and you're misrepresenting God. Because you're creating this spooky space that produces nothing in God's name. That's a Jebusite spirit. You need to be free of it. Are you willing to pay the full price? You see? Is there dependency where there should be ownership? Is there manipulation where there should be freedom? Is there a spiritual reward without fruitfulness or impact? We need to move out of that. And listen, let me give you a prophetic word. If you're dealing with a Jebusite spirit, you need to get out. Listen, you are not a guest in Jerusalem. You're supposed to be a ruler in Zion. You must refuse to offer what costs you nothing. You must reclaim every threshing floor the enemy has occupied. You must choose to rebuild the city of God. Be free from control. Be free from manipulation. Be free from compromise. That's what makes us Cyrus. We build, we purchase, we reform, we govern. That's the reality of who we are. We move forward without being limited, without being held back, because this is where God wants to bring us to. This is the fullness of who we are. This is the functionality of the power of what God is doing. The Cyrus Community is a kingdom construction unit, a reformation movement, and an economic warfare tribe. You heard that? We are a kingdom construction unit, a reformation movement, and an economic warfare tribe. So listen, in this series so far, we have identified Babylon, we have recovered the treasure, we have talked of renewing the mind, we have redefined what business is about, and on this particular one, we've talked about reclaiming the threshing floor. Now we must understand we were commissioned to build Jerusalem, a city of peace, a city of power, a city of prosperity and of prophetic dominion. This is really the journey. This is where we are going. And all that I'm saying is a people. Jerusalem is not a place, it's a people. So when I say a city of peace, it's a people who operate from a place called Shalom. A place called Shalom is a place of prosperity, a place where everything is functioning, a place where families are thriving, relationships are thriving, economy is thriving, and we are operating in prophetic dominion, meaning we are always one step ahead. We understand the times, we understand the seasons, we know what we are supposed to do. That's who we are. And that's why we continue to have our different other forums to unpack these things. That's why we have the master classes. And that's why we have the mind gyms. So the mind gyms, the master classes, all these processes bring us to what God wants to do in this dynamic. So this particular August, we'll not have a mind gym, but we'll have another dimension of a mind gym. Please listen.
Are you married, divorced, single, engaged, widowed, or remarried? Then this invitation is for you. On August 16th, 2025, the Cyrus Community invites you to the powerful 2-as-1 workshop, happening live at the Hyatt Hotel in Westlands, Nairobi. This is more than just a relationship seminar. It's a divine reset. Whether you're navigating love, loss, healing, or hope, come discover God's original blueprint for wholeness, unity, and purposeful relationships. It's time to unlearn the patterns of pain and rediscover the joy of walking in agreement with heaven's design. No matter your season, your story is not over. 2 as 1. because God still writes beautiful stories. Date: the 16th of August 2025. Venue: Hyatt Hotel Westlands. Register now. Don't miss this divine appointment.
I'm looking forward to see you there, because we'll have some powerful kingdom conversations that will bring freedom in our lives. After that particular conversation, then we will resume some of our programs and we'll give you the calendar of how that will work out. This is where I say, keep it kingdom, keep it pure, and God bless.